this one about? Globs! Kind of. It's about projects, side projects, experimental side projects with globs and goo of leftover paint. So when I'm mixing a palette for something, I always over squeeze out the tubes of paint. I'm always over gluing all over. You're trying to color match all the things, if you're trying to do some direct painting, or if you're doing layer based, you're like, I think I'm starting with a limited palette, and then I'm just like, squish, squish, squish. And then you get that palette knife, and it's just like, ooh. So when you get all excited with your palette, full of stuff, I just end up with these extra lumps of color.
Look at this extra blob.
But the benefits of being bad at squeezing out the proper amount of paint, even though it sounds like a wasteful, horrible thing, it's not for me, because what I do is I have a various assortment of boards and cheap canvases and other things all thrown around that I can utilize to have a few ongoing projects of just experiment, fun time, don't worry about it, see what happens with it type of side painting. Really good practice. Improvisational things, something that I don't even think about what is going to happen. Practice opening up with texture and really just kind of experimenting. So this initial painting, I utilized this little canvas that was a little side thing that I had already put a base of magenta underneath, probably just extra paint from the time before. And I start to use a palette knife. When I start to use the palette knife, at least in these experiments, I'm usually just using the end of my paint palette, slapping it on to just like get some sort of textural base to see what happens. I've been really liking the immediacy of using the palette knife to just slap things on. It just has this fun, satisfying buttering up things and slicing through things. But palette knife painting, just because it feels like it should be quick and stabby and slicing through, definitely is something that you might want to have a lot more forethought than I have put into these practices, and we'll see that along the way. But I was thinking about putting down a base that I could kind of scratch draw into. You ever have those kindergarten art things where they're colored underneath like a black wax and you could scratch them off? I think it's kind of that feeling, and also maybe the utilizing the point tip like a pen a little bit. Different ways than I would necessarily go to approach something when I kind of have more of a plan. When you do see paint go over without picking up some of the other paint, that's usually because it's a dried layer underneath. Acrylic, that can mean it's like 10 minutes, but with oil, that usually means that it's at least a few days, sometimes even a week. So when I go into this next layer of other color and you see that it's not picking up over that green, that means it's been 4 or 5 days in between. You're supposed to then utilize the rules of fat over lean, have more medium in the second layer, especially if you have a very thick layer of just paint underneath. You would want to have more of a type of medium in there for increased flexibility or slower drying time. Oh, who knows if I did that? I believe I started to mix in some liquid impasto, which will increase the elasticity, but also retains your brush strokes. I have a lot of projects going in rotation because there's a lot of time that you can leave one to dry while you're working on something else, and I definitely have to utilize the paints at the end of a session sometimes because I won't be able to paint for 4 days because of this glorious day jobs. That's surprising as this is. I do not only make money from my fabulous paint experiments that go on here. It used to be lots of serving. Definitely did that way too long to still like people. That's definitely put a damper on humans for me. Oh God. Honestly, you should have to work in the restaurant industry at least a year before you're allowed to set foot in a restaurant as a customer. That should be just a rule. Just tip your server. Then nepotism got me a job as a temp programmer. There was a lot of learning involved. Took a lot of reward snack breaks after every function. Lots of trial and error and failure. Some successes. I learned a bunch, and I eventually became sufficiently mediocre. A usable application was created. It worked out okay in the end. But now I'm perpetually always being adjunct art professor, application filler outer. That's really as fulfilling as it sounds. But there's some good stuff too. I have amazing students that are just like real badass and oozing with talent and glory. And I like my current day job, just getting me out in the mud and the dirt. I know it's surprising, but I really like mud. But yeah, I like digging, I get to dig, and I use a Sawzall. I'm not as scared of the Sawzall anymore. I still feel like it's gonna come at my eye, but I just try not to point it that way anymore. And I met some snakes, lots of toads, lots of frogs and toads. There's this turtle I met once, some snails, some slimy snails. I get bonus tools. Anything that's broken becomes mine. Like I got this mega wrench that I utilize as an intimidation tool and, you know, just a good hefty girth to it. I like my mega wrench. I found this amazing antique treasure of a saw the other day in the mulch. So like, oh, what? No, I'm talking about a painting. What is happening? This is why I should make an outline. Why did I plan? It has nothing to do with the globs. It's all getting cut anyway. 40 minutes that was me talking about dirt treasures. It's good treasure though. But anyways, so I do feel like the excavator is worth mentioning though. Like I get to drive the giant excavator once all the other skilled people aren't around to drive it, and it's like a giant, more hazardous claw machine that if you lose, somebody broke something really important or someone's dead. And I like that kind of danger. I do wish I was good though. None of that's important. What's happening? So something I notice about myself is that even if I'm trying to start working abstractly, I tend to search for something recognizable in my work, which is something that I am okay with, but I always am trying to break out of that so I can start to be a little more abstract and not need to have such recognizable space. Figure out even further where to push the texture to be about the surface physicality and like the goo that sticks out and maybe some lines scratched in, and resolving that with my desire to always be like, that looks like a place, here's some space, or just trying to also care about atmosphere and distance, which I do. But with this, I did start to treat that strip of white and red as kind of a flame and start to grow out this feeling of fire or electricity around it, and it ended up looking almost like that was part of possibly a dark space or dark sky with things crawling through in that night. So what I would take away from that is I really ended up liking how the scratches into the darker areas gave a lot of dimension and imagination to those areas. Have interesting, windy, almost abstracted tentacles coming at this weird flame fire thing. So one thing that might be interesting is then to play with a little more intentionality in the way that I'm drawing in with a palette knife and having these textures occur, planning out a little bit ahead of time where I want there to be this texture and this drawing into, and where I think that it might be interesting to have a smoother area of paint that might become a little more atmospheric. And when I looked at this, and I've enjoyed it as its own experiment, I think I would enjoy it more if I had utilized a reference of flame or something to create the light source from an actual fire than be some live painting. I might have a lot of fun if I had planned a little bit briefly, like a composition that might tend to imply some sort of nature vista, some sort of scene, but try to kind of break it up into atmospheric depth and some of that surface strangeness that I'm really into and still figuring out how to use. Even if I had a different set of goals or things I want to work on, it's always useful to have little practice pieces to just splot things on to see what happens. Whether it be a color study, playing around with just like, how would these colors work together and like make it into some muddy mess you never meant to make, but maybe you learn something on the way, or there's some little parts that pop out that you really like the combination of. So one thing that this is screaming to be is bigger. So I have all these little canvases that I've been playing around with, throwing on paint when I'm not thinking, but I think I need to give myself some bigger scratch pads, some bigger extra sketchy, don't worry about anything, improvisational painting backups for when I have extra paint, or even a day that I'm just like, I'm just gonna worry about playing around and slapping on things. Like, what if it's just like, it needs to be wall size. Everything needs to be wall size. Not true. There's small work is awesome too, but I feel like some of my creations just beg to be giant. Even just like this side. I've been working on a big board that I was gonna do something with, but maybe I get a second board. Maybe I get a second board and I drag that guy up here and that thing becomes my scratch thing. That could be, like, I think I should just bring it up now, because that's definitely begging to be big. Ah, it's so big! Ah! Yes. Oh my god. Good thing I eat so much cake. That's, otherwise I'd be like too fit. That would be crazy. Oh, okay. Oh my god, but look, the scale with which I could be like flailing so much. Like, can you imagine the other like little thing, but like big, and then it has more intentionality with like where I'm putting things. But I'm maybe not gonna worry too much about that. Keep this literally as improvisational and impulsive as the others, this might still become just like parts I don't necessarily love or not. It's okay that it's big. It's still practice, and then I can push and pull parts that I love from it into things that maybe I have more of a vision for. And this, I'll just start doing things, and then we'll see where the vision comes to. Get the palette knife and be just like, but I definitely need to get like a bigger palette knife than at this point, like that. So you just want to like flail, big and flaily would be what we wanted. I have some big brushes which are so sad, but this guy's fat. I have even like fatter one though, and this is just like, flimsy. Like these! Can you just believe I get these for free? Like, you know, pretty good bonus. I can't believe they're like, throw that out, Carolyn, what are you gonna do with that? Psh. God, some dual wielding, flail painting around. Or look at this board that I shiftily made. If you don't look too close, this isn't that bad craftsmanship. So, next time probably based on the size of this, 5-10 months from now, this will be something where we get to see how that kind of like all worked out. You know, improvisational painting, just for practice, for seeing, for texture, for everything. It's pretty important. I like this as a pointer too. I feel like this is a good. Months. This is a dangerous motion. This could have repercussions. Oh, what is that? Did I break a paint?